Okay, Madam Chair, it is 9 o'clock and we do have a quorum, so please start the meeting at your convenience. Thanks.
Thank you, Todd. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the 360th meeting of the Baltimore Regional Transportation Board. This meeting is being recorded. If anyone online should experience difficulties during the meeting, please send a message in the chat box. In addition, I'm going to ask that all BRTB members turn on their cameras during the roll call for attendance and for voting so that the public is clear about the BRTB membership. So with the cameras on this morning, I'm going to ask Regina Artis to start the roll call to determine member participation. Regina, can you get us started this morning?
Good morning. Yes, I can. For attendance, the City of Annapolis.
Chris Kubiak's here. Thank you. Good morning.
Great. Good morning. Anne Arundel County. Sam, I see you there.
Good morning.
There you are.
Sam, stay here.
Baltimore City. And Corinne is here also. Baltimore County.
Here.
Okay. Carroll County.
I'm here.
Harford County.
Good morning, here.
Okay, great. Howard County.
Here.
Queen Anne's County.
Here.
Maryland Department of Transportation.
Others here.
Good morning. RTA of Central Maryland. Okay. And we'll just check on other members. M.MTA.
Present. MDTA.
Okay. Okay, MDTA, right. Okay, I was looking for Maryland Transit Administration, but that's okay. Maryland Department of the Environment.
Here.
Maryland Department of Planning.
Bihui, she's here. Good morning.
Good morning. And is FHWA here? Not yet. Thank you.
And Corinne, we saw your chat, so we'll wait for you to disconnect and come back in. I mean, we'll watch you as you disconnect. She got you on the roll. Okay. So our first item is the approval of the minutes from our November BRTB meeting. Has everyone had a chance to review the minutes? And if so, can I have a motion and a second to approve the minutes?
Howard County.
Motion to approve.
Howard County, second.
County.
Motion to approve was it Anne Arundel County?
Yeah.
Okay, and
Yes.
then second was Howard County.
Correct.
Perfect. Are there any edits from the members? Hearing none, we will now vote on approval of the minutes. When your name is read, please indicate A or nay. Regina, can you read the names for us, please? Thank you.
The City of Annapolis.
Aye.
Anne Arundel County.
Aye.
Baltimore City.
Aye.
Baltimore County.
Aye.
Carroll County.
Aye.
Harford County.
Aye.
Howard County.
Aye.
Queen Anne's County.
Aye.
MDOT.
Aye.
RTA of Central Maryland. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Regina. Next on our agenda is a public participation opportunity where we offer the public a chance to speak to the board. If anyone has comments on any of the action items, please wait for that item to be discussed. If there is anyone who wishes to address the board at this time, please indicate so in the chat box. We'll give you a second, and then Todd, can you indicate if anyone wishes to speak to BRTB?
Madam Chair, currently there is no one requesting to speak in the chat box.
Okay. The next item that we have is the report on public involvement activity from Monica Behetta. Monica, can you give us your report on public involvement, please?
Sure. Good morning.
Good morning.
So in front of you, you'll see the public involvement report for December. We had recently closed a comment period at the start of the month on December 5th. We closed a comment period on the Patapsco Regional Greenway, Guinness to Southwest Area Park. We've been working on helping to design the Patapsco Regional Greenway in different segments and consulting with the public on that. And we had about 40 people that attended a community meeting on November 1st, and nearly 100 people shared comments by email, text, or on the project website. We had an additional 30 people who took a survey and 12 added comments to our story map. So we had really good participation from the community that gave solid comments for us to consider. So the project team is currently reviewing and responding to all those comments, and the responses will be posted on the project website. For those who are interested in learning more, you can visit publicinput.com/PRG to learn more. Looking ahead to 2024, which is almost here, we will be conducting a range of public involvement and public engagement activities. A couple of the large projects that we're going to be working on is the vision for a regional bicycle network. So we'll be working with folks around the region on that. We have another segment of the Patapsco Regional Greenway down to Stony Run near BWI Airport. We will also be looking at a review of the transportation fees, fares, fees, and fines. And then also in the spring, we will have our federal certification review by our federal planning partners. The dates to be determined, but we're looking at probably May or June in the spring. So everyone should stay tuned for information about those opportunities. And I just wanted to let folks know we publish an e-newsletter called Be More Involved. We publish that monthly, and it features articles about how folks can be involved in opportunities like I just mentioned. It also includes opportunities from our project partners and board members. So if anybody's interested, there's a link to sign up. You can sign up on the BMC website at baltimoremetro.org as well. And if anybody has announcements from the board that you want to share in our Be More Involved e-newsletter, you can always send those to me and I'll include them. Thank you.
Thank you, Monica. We will now move on to the action items. Todd, can you introduce the first action item for us, please?
Sorry, Madam Chair, I think we need to move to the technical committee report from the.
I'm sorry, Dan, I skipped right over you. My
Okay.
bad. I was Dan.
All
Can
right.
you do a technical committee report for me, please?
I sure can. I'm going to turn my camera off while I go through the report. Thank you. So yeah, the technical committee again met on December 5th. BMC staff presented the two resolutions that are here today, 24-8 and 24-9. For the first one, 24-8 is for the benefit of Annapolis to add the Annapolis Electric Ferry Pilot Program project to the tip. This project will consist of a fixed route ferry service for passengers and bicycles. All components of this project are expected to be complete in FY24 with service beginning in FY25. Resolution 24-9 is for the benefit of Baltimore City to add the Baltimore Ferry Service Improvements Project. That project will improve ADA access between existing ferry landing docks to prepare two existing light-duty ferry boats, which have reached the end of their useful life, and they're going to be replaced with new hybrid electric powered ferry boats. And of course, the technical committee recommended both of those requests move to the BRTB for consideration. SHA provided an update on the status of the 2020 Census Urban Area Boundary Adjustment process. This is being done to align with existing planning boundaries, address irregularities in the census urban areas, maintain consistency and highway functional classification system, and also addresses impacts funding federal highway system. So SHA will submit the boundaries to the Federal Highway Administration for review by December 27th, and then begin the process to review the functional classification of roadways. Don't expect a lot of major changes there, but there might be a few. BMC provided an update on the 2022 crash data and shared a preview of the 5 regional safety performance targets that will be coming to the board. In 2022, traffic crash related fatalities, serious injuries, and non-motorist fatalities and serious injuries decreased in the Baltimore region. Well, of course, we all know the state saw an increase in those fatalities. Staff shared the anticipated targets for 2020 to 2024 average and a goal for 2030 for members to review. So those figures will be shared at the January board meeting with a resolution. Then the BMC staff reviewed the schedule for the fiscal year 2025 Unified Planning Work Program Addendum and noted the technical committee will review the tasks and budget at the February technical committee meeting and indicate, actually, is that coming to the board in February or the technical committee?
Tech committee will make an approval for a release in the February meeting.
Thank you. So we'll look at those in January. We ranked a list, the technical committee members ranked a list of proposed topics. In addition to those tasks, members were able to write in other suggestions. So based on the technical committee feedback, BMC staff will bring a suggested focus area program for FY 2025 based on the rankings and the suggested topics. Finally, MDOT, I shared information regarding the federal and state grant programs. Of note, there were several recent awards, including the Maritime Administration grant under the Port Infrastructure Development Program for $47 million awarded to establish a major offshore wind logistics and manufacturing hub at the Trade Point Atlantic site. And secondly, a series of Federal Railroad Administration grants under the Intercity Passenger Rail Program. $4.7 billion awarded towards the BMP tunnel replacement. There were $2.1 billion for 3 major Amtrak improvement replacements, the Bush River Bridge, the Gunpowder River Bridge, and the Susquehanna River Bridge. $108 million for the Baltimore Penn Station and $21.6 million for the Northeast Corridor, South End Renewal and Speed Improvement Planning Study. A number of other important words were also named. And that's our technical committee report. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. We appreciate it. The next item on the agenda is the action items. So Todd, now can you introduce the action items, the first action item for us?
Certainly. Madam Chair and Board, today the BRTB is being asked to consider Resolution 24-8 to approve a request from the City of Annapolis to consider a new electric passenger ferry pilot program. I now ask Mr. Keith Kucharik from BMC to introduce the resolution, and then I'll turn it over to Mr. Kwakadua. And I'll pass it over to Keith.
Thank you, Todd, and good morning, everybody. As Todd and Dan both mentioned, in Resolution 24-8, City of Annapolis is requesting to amend the 2024 to 2027 TIP to add 1 new project. The Annapolis Electric Ferry Pilot Program will add $3.5 million of Section 5307 Passenger Ferry Grant Discretionary Program funds in FY24 and FY25 for the purchase of ferry vessels, landing improvements, and electric charging infrastructure. This amendment was presented to the technical committee, as mentioned, on December 5th and was recommended to be sent to the BRTB as presented. The ICG has also reviewed this project and determined it to be exempt according to the conformity rule. And as Todd mentioned, Kwaku from the city of Annapolis will present this project. So thank you.
Thank you, Todd and Keith. I don't have a video, so I will do it without the video. Can everybody hear me, please?
Yes, we can hear you.
All right, thank you. My name is Kwaku Ajiman Dua. I'm with the City of Annapolis Transportation Department, and I'm glad to be here. Yes, this amendment adds a new project to the 2024-2027 TIP, and the program is Annapolis Electric Ferry Pilot Program. The Ferry Pilot Program is part of the Annapolis Mobility Plan, which has other elements such as an all-electric downtown transit system, electric cart called the neighborhood vehicles, which the mayor would like to call is the 10-minute trolley for free transit services in Eastport and Annapolis downtown. We believe that the program will help decrease car trips, reduces pollution, provides connectivity and opportunities for low-income residents to travel via the water to reach downtown. In FY 2022, the city did apply for FTA, competitive funding opportunity for electric or low-emitting ferry program, and we did apply for that. We did get money, and then that's why we're here. So basically, the program will consist of a fixed route service for passengers and, of course, for bicycles. We will make room for bicycles. The route is about 1.5 mile long. That will connect Eastport to downtown Annapolis. It is not replacing the existing on-demand water taxi service, which is normally in operation in summer. It's going to be a complement to that. And based upon our calculation, we do estimate the annual ridership to be just over 20,000 people, mostly during the summer months. Next slide, please. Thank you. As Keith did mention, the total project cost was estimated to be about $3.5 million. And this is only for capital. So the city is on the hooks for the operational costs or look for other grants opportunities for operating this particular service. The funding sources basically Section 5307 passenger ferry grant. And of course, we look how much for that. In terms of financing ratio, 85% of that is from the grant, which actually is equal to about $2.975 million. And the city will provide 50%, look how much, in the amount of $525,000. Next slide, please. These are the program components, ferry vessels, the landing improvements, as Keith did mention, and the charging infrastructure. Of course, for transit, you always want to have your spare ratio. So in this particular case, the spare ratio is going to be 100% because it will be 2 ferries that we plan to purchase. Landing improvements, about $1.5 million. And also the charging infrastructure that will help charge the battery for the ferry vessels. Next slide, please. Okay, so here we are underway in terms of the various program components. We have begun that. We have been assigned an environmental planner by MDOT-MTA, and we are very grateful for that to help with the NEPA review process and approval. We are also working on the RFPs for the ferry vessels, landing improvements, and charging infrastructure. And it is our hope that come FY 2025, you will have that particular service in place. Next slide, please. Oh, okay, very quick. So here is my information here. If anybody has any questions, I'll be glad to answer to the best of my ability. Thank you.
Thank you both. I will now ask a member to move for approval of the resolution in a second. Does any BRTB member have any questions on the resolution? If not, can someone make a motion? And then a second?
Anne moves to approve.
Baltimore City seconds.
And Arano move for a motion and Baltimore City second. Okay, so we'll now ask any member of the public if you have any questions or comments.
Madam Chair, currently there is no one requesting to speak in the chat box.
Well, I'll tell you, I'm excited about the ferry service in Annapolis. I shop downtown Annapolis all the time, so that's going to be pretty exciting.
Thank you.
Yeah, so, all right. Again, with cameras on, when Regina reads your name, please indicate A or nay.
City of Annapolis,
Aye.
Anne Arundel County,
Aye.
Baltimore City,
Aye.
Baltimore County,
Aye.
Carroll County,
Aye.
Harford County,
Aye.
Howard County,
Aye.
Queen Anne's County,
Aye.
MDOT,
Aye.
RTA of Central Maryland. He's here.
Aye.
Got it. Thank you.
All right, with that, the resolution has passed. And Todd, can you introduce the next action item for us?
Certainly, today the BRTB is being asked to consider Resolution 24-9 to approve a request from the MDOT MTA for the Baltimore City Ferry Replacement and ADA Improvements to Docking Stations Project. I will now ask Mr. Kucharik to introduce the resolution, then turn it over to Ms. Erica Fall. Keith?
Thank you again, Todd. In resolution 24-9, the MDOT MTA is requesting to amend the 2024 to 2027 TIP to add one new project. As Todd mentioned, it's the Baltimore City Ferry Service Improvements project. And that will add $9.376 million of Section 5307 Passenger Ferry Grant Discretionary Program funds in FY24 for the purchase of hybrid electric vehicles, hybrid electric ferry vessels, and landing improvements. This amendment was presented to the technical committee on December 5th and was recommended to be sent to the BRTB as presented. Additionally, the ICG has also reviewed this project and determined it to be exempt according to the conformity rule. So I'm going to turn it over to Erica, and she'll give you the presentation on this project.
Good morning, everyone. I will be presenting the background, the apportionment details, anticipated schedule, and the benefits for the Baltimore Ferry Service Improvements Project. MDOT MTA was awarded funds to improve ADA access and restore Baltimore's ferry service to a state of good repair. ADA access will be improved between existing ferry landing decks and will replace existing light-duty ferry boats that have reached the end of their useful life with new hybrid electric powered ferry boats. ADA access will be improved by matching the ferry landing heights with ferry decks and constructing landings that will have unimpeded access for wheelchairs and persons with mobility devices. In total, it will be 5 ferry landings that will be replaced. State of good repair will be achieved by replacing 2 light-duty ferry boats that have reached the end of their useful life and will be replaced with electric hybrid ferry boats. The ferry specifications were developed in coordination with the U.S. Coast Guard for Subchapter T 49 passenger ferries with low-emitting hybrid power systems. And in addition, each new ferry boat will include storage for up to 2 bikes. The project will be utilizing Section 5307 Passenger Ferry Grant Discretionary Program funds. The Passenger Ferry Grant Program provides competitive funding for projects that support passenger ferry systems in urbanized areas. These funds constitute a core investment in the enhancement. Thank you so much. These funds constitute a core investment in the enhancement and revitalization of public ferry systems in the nation's urbanized areas. Thank you. Above is the anticipated schedule. Landings and docks are expected to be completed in fiscal year 2024. And the purchase of the new ferries is expected in fiscal year 25, with delivery of the ferries in fiscal year 26. Some of the benefits for this project include the following. The project will support those with disabilities and mobility needs by creating ADA accessibility and will increase transportation options and equality for all segments of the population. The hybrid electric ferry boats will help in reducing greenhouse gas emissions according to state and local plans. And existing ferry boats have reached the end of their useful life and need to be replaced. If you have any questions or need more information, please feel free to reach out to me. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I now ask a member for a move for approval of the resolution in a second. I'll move. Can I get a second?
Annapolis seconds. Thank you.
Baltimore County moved and Annapolis second. Does any of our BRTB members have any questions?
Question about the capacity of the existing ferries. What do the current ones hold? 49 for new.
I'm not really too sure. I will double check with the project manager and let you know. I would assume it'd be right around the same amount, but I'll take down your information. Could I get that information to you after the meeting?
No, don't worry about it.
Okay.
Curious. I just Keith, you might want to change the picture of the ferry on the resolution. It's from the from a watermark vessel to a ferry, but anyway.
Bruce would
for the
pick
public, that's not a ferry shown in the resolution, I don't think. Or at least one of our ferries. Thanks, that's all I had.
Okay, any other questions from any members? Comments? Okay, we'll now ask if any member of the public has questions or comments on the resolution. If so, could you please indicate in the chat box?
Currently, there is no one requesting to speak in the chat box.
All right, with that, again, with cameras on, Regina, can you read the name and can you indicate A or nay, please?
City of Annapolis,
Aye.
Anne Arundel County,
Aye.
got it, Sam, thank you. Baltimore City,
Aye.
Baltimore County,
Aye.
Carroll County,
Aye.
Harford County,
Aye.
Howard County,
Aye.
Queen Anne's County,
Aye.
MDOT,
Now I was low. Aye.
okay. RTA of Central Maryland,
Aye.
thank you.
All right, the resolution has passed. Now we'll move on to the next item on the agenda. On behalf of the Maryland Transportation Authority, Ms. Kelly Morrison of CDM Smith will brief the BRTB on traffic trends and forecasts on MDTA's facilities in the Baltimore region. We welcome the MDTA to this meeting. Ms. Morrison, are you with us this morning?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much.
So I'm Kelly Morrison. I work for CDM Smith, and we perform as the TNR consultant for MDTA, and we perform the annual forecast, which is what you're all used to seeing every year. And so the MDTA asked that I go ahead and present and give an update to you on our most recent forecast, which is what we're going to dive into today. So if you can go to the first slide. It's just a quick overview of the MDTA facilities and the ones that we do perform forecasts for. So it does include all of the 7 legacy facilities, in the Baltimore region, as well as north of Baltimore on the I-95 corridor with JFK and the parallel Haddam Bridge, as well as the Bay Bridge and the Nice Bridge, which are your more peripheral facilities. And we do also perform the forecast for the inter-county connector and the I-95 express lanes, which are your time of day price facilities. So those are your commuter facilities, not the bridges and tunnels, which are the legacy facilities, which you'll hear me use that term consistently throughout the presentation. You can go to the next slide. We're going to dive into some historical trends. So the first thing we have is vehicle miles traveled. This is data that we pull from FHWA every year, just to get a handle on how trends are performing in Maryland compared to the United States, to get a more broad view beyond the legacy facilities and MDTA facilities. And unfortunately, there is usually a little bit of a lag. So we're always a year behind when we're doing the forecast. So we only have data for this through 2021. We are interested to see the 2022 once that's out, and will be included in next year's forecast, because obviously the COVID pandemic had a large impact on commuting, which has been a big feature of not just our MDTA forecast, but all of our TNR forecasting for the last few years, and how those trends have played out. So what this table really is just showing is how much the pandemic impacted vehicle miles traveled in 2020. The state of Maryland had trends slightly above what you're seeing for the United States for interstate and total traffic. And in 2021, we did obviously see some recovery as things returned to normal, but we weren't quite reaching the pre-pandemic levels we would expect to see, in 2019. So this just goes to show that along with MDTA, vehicle miles traveled are reduced overall in 2021. They were recovering. We do anticipate to see that 2022 will bounce back as well, and that data is available. But really just a metric to help us gauge, where is commuting and how has traffic changed to support us in our forecast. You can go to the next slide. For MDTA, the toll transactions have really been the measure that we use for the growth on the system when doing the forecast, because we have performed this forecast for MDTA for at least the last 10 years that I've been with CDM Smith, and then beyond that a little bit. Unfortunately, with the COVID pandemic, a lot of toll agencies had to make some quick decisions for, health and safety reasons to remove toll collectors. So that did force AET, or all electronic tolling, to go into place, because that provided the safety for those that were still on the road during the pandemic. And it was a quick thing that MDTA had to do, but it did cause a little bit of business rule changes that they needed to implement to account for their customers that had to go through this quick change, all while enduring a pandemic. So while the toll transactions historically were really great trends for what's happening on the roadside, in 2020 and even through 2022, this measure is skewed a little bit. So it doesn't quite just show you impacts of traffic, but also of toll collections. When you go to AET or all electronic, you have leakage for when video tolling occurs, which is taking the image of the license plate at the lane side and billing the customer after the fact. And when MDTA did go AET during the pandemic, they chose to pause these invoicing. So to give customers a break during the pandemic while people were not working, they didn't want to be invoicing. But it did cause a bit of a irregular trend in collection. So you can kind of see this, obviously in 2020, things did decline because overall transactions were lower, but also as a result of those business rule changes. And that continued through 2021, because this is fiscal year that I'm showing here, which for MDTA is July through June. So a fiscal year of 2021 would be starting in July of 2020 through June of 2021, the following year. So in 2021, because they were still pausing of the invoicing of video tolls through the, I want to say, second quarter of the fiscal year, it did cause a bit more declines in 2021, which is different to the actual traffic trends. So when reviewing our report in the past, the transactions were very stable, as I mentioned, but to keep in mind, in the last few years and through this year, the trend is really a reflection of collections, which can be slightly different. And then if we go to the next slide, this is where we get into in-lane data. So this is raw data at the lane side, which accounts for every vehicle that is traveling through. So it does not account for leakage, so the vehicles that are passing through that may not end up paying this would represent, the best picture of what is the traffic like and what has been happening in the past few years, irrespective of the collections that's happening. So we have this table for 2019 through 2023, and I think this would be your best way of gauging by facility, which is what's running across the top. What did the growth look like? And this is total traffic at the bottom, but we do have it split out by cars and trucks because we have seen different trends in cars and trucks since the pandemic. In 2020 and 2021, trucks were doing quite well as a result, I think, of e-commerce picking up during the pandemic. So the trends were varying quite different between the passenger cars and commercial vehicles. But looking at it on a total basis, especially in the growth in the last 2 years, in 2022, we really did see the more full recovery, reaching close to, if not above 2019 levels. And then in 2023, we certainly reached it for the main facilities, being, the I-95 corridor of Kennedy Highway, the Haddon Bridge, US 301, those are both up in the northern corner, and then the harbor facilities, the trio that we refer to, which is the Harbor Tunnel, that's your I-895 Baltimore Harbor Tunnel, your Fort McHenry Tunnel, which is I-95, and your Key Bridge, which is I-695. And so as much as there's a little bit of traffic going back and forth, the harbor tunnels, those 3 major ones, did grow year over year, 23 over 2022. And so that's what really take and use as our estimate of growth in the area and how we can compare that to the growth that we are going to assume in our 10-year forecast for MDTA. Next slide. We also like, in addition to the VMT, to look at traffic on other highways. So luckily, Maryland, through the DOT, the state highway, they provide traffic counts on facilities and other roadways across the state. So we like to pull one, at least one from each corridor. That would be another way of checking growth in the region around each facility. So being the northern, central, and the southern regions. The counts that we have are going across this top. We have historically used these because we find them to be, like I said, good measures of what traffic in the area should be like. If we're seeing any difference in the trend on MDTA, we will look into that and see, okay, why would the growth be different? Is it a construction reason? To try to understand it so that we can then decide, do we need to incorporate that into the 10-year forecast, or is it something that we need to account for as an outlier in a single year, or if we're building off the recent data to generate the forecast? So these ones, once again, I mean, the big focus for us at this most recent forecast was what's happened since the pandemic. So that's going to be your bottom line average annual percent change from 2019 to 2022. And overall, a few of them still have not reached the pre-pandemic levels, with the exclusion of US 1 and I-95, which isn't a surprise. If people are going to be commuting and driving, those are 2 major roads that we would expect to see the complete return back to pre-pandemic levels. Let me go to the next slide. Now I'm going to kind of get into the actual forecast itself. So there's a lot that goes into our TNR forecast, but it's all based on a set of inputs and assumptions. So in our report every year in Chapter 4, we do outline these. We do our best to, come up with assumptions that are realistic. What is our best guess? Because some things, we can't predict perfectly, like human behavior when it comes to changes since the pandemic. But a few of the ones that I wanted to just go over and point out to you all is our growth forecast. So our growth forecast is something our economist does in-house. We did for this year use the historical transactions, because historically when there was cash collection, it was a good measure of growth. And we use that to come up with equations for each facility separately to come up with the 10-year growth forecast. And that's just our true estimate of how the growth will proceed over the 10-year forecast. In an area like this, for a legacy, well-established facility, we don't expect there to be a lot of growth. There's only so much growth potential in a saturated area. So, the output of this, it's usually not more than 0.5% to 1% per year for the facility. And we do perform it for commercial vehicles and passenger cars separately, because obviously they can be influenced by different things. GDP, retail sales, things of that nature are much more important for the commercial vehicles. Another big one is definitely construction impacts. We rely heavily on MDTA's involvement, and as well as the Department of Engineering, to provide us with their, latest schedules for construction projects. what facilities will be impacted, the duration, and if possible, what is their estimate of traffic impacts? You know, what will there be diversion? Will it only be off-peak closures that won't impact traffic as much, and things like that? And kind of rolling into everything I mentioned earlier with the pandemic and converting to all electronic tolling and the suspension of invoicing temporarily, we had to make some assumptions because there's still a few unpaid transactions that remain post the customer assistance plan. The customer assistance plan is what we refer to when MDTA made the business rules for customers to pause invoicing temporarily and give them additional time to pay back those tolls that they may have racked up during the 2020 year. So for those amounts that remain unpaid, we made some assumptions of the share of people that would be paying, because at this point they are being sent for motor vehicle holds and suspension in cases where the account has reached a certain level. So understanding this repercussion and getting back into the enforcement policies, we did assume a bit of an uptick this year in collections due to these unpaid transactions. So it doesn't correlate to an uptick in traffic. It's purely collections of transactions that occurred in the past that will be collected this year. So another thing to keep in mind when looking at our forecast, if you see a bump in fiscal 2024, it's as a result of the customer assistance plan and wrapping up that component. And another thing to mention, because this is a big deviation from last year, at this point, we're quite a few years past when the pandemic occurred, and telecommuting trends have kind of reached their saturation point. You know, we haven't really seen many return to work policies being enacted. Certainly if there was, then we would need to consider that. But at this point, particularly in the Maryland area, we felt that the pandemic commuting trends have occurred. At this point, we're considering it, you know, this is where we're going to stand in terms of commuting, you know, whether that's people are going in 2 days, 3 days a week. It's kind of embedded within the data that we're seeing. So, we're assuming this is the new normal for commuting trends and that there won't be any sort of additional recovery because of the pandemic, which last year we had assumed, particularly for the priced managed lane and the ICC. Because they're commuter and traffic-based facilities, they're going to be more heavily impacted by the changes in trends. So at this point, we're assuming, this is where we stand now, and it would be growth on top of that, and no additional growth simply from the pandemic. And then this is just showing what our forecasted transactions are for the legacy system. So that's the 7 facilities I listed in the beginning, not including the ICC and the I-95 ETLs, because I know, the Baltimore region specifically is what is your focus is on. So as I mentioned, there has been a little bit of changes with the video component specifically because of the customer assistance. So as those transactions do get paid over time, we are having a little bit of decline over the next few years, only because the backlog was being paid. You had an uptick in 23. Now it's kind of starting to taper down. It does include a little bit of the registration hold people in 2024, but beyond 25 and on, that's what we're seeing as normal growth. And then it includes, our construction impacts. So that's why you get some deviations and say 26, fiscal 28 and 29. Those are all due to construction impacts, particularly in 28 and 29, the Baltimore Harbor Tunnel AAT conversion, which is detailed in our report. But overall, if you look at the outer years of the forecast for the legacy system, we're looking at a combined growth in the range of 0.6 to 0.7% per year. So as I mentioned, for a well-established facility, that 0.5% to 1% per year is typically what we see and what our econometric analysis provided. And so this does, one note I just wanted to point out for that last one is, and with the next slide, is this does include leakage. So this is your collected transactions, because this is how we provide the forecast to MDTA, is not traffic in the lane, but the actual collected transactions that are paid, whether it's by video or Easy Pass, whatever method of payment, but collected transactions. This table just takes that forecast from the previous slide and breaks it out by facility, in case you want to see, depending on the corridor of interest, what the forecast is looking like. And this would, embed the varying growth rates and the varying construction impacts by each facility. As I stated, the BHT AAT conversion is the biggest construction project we see. So you'll see declines in BHT, but because of the nature of the 3 harbor crossings, you'll see a lot of it does shift to either the Fort McHenry or the Key Bridge, and a very slight amount of diversion that we will assume uses local or other routes, or maybe doesn't take the trip altogether. The growth rates for the passenger cars are in the range of the 0.25 to 1%. So in some of these facilities, we really do assume very low growth, even less than 0.5%. Whereas for the commercial vehicles, because of the outstanding growth we saw in the last few years with e-commerce trends, we assumed a slight negative growth in the next year as kind of a right sizing of the trends we've seen recently before ongoing to, a more normal growth rate in the range of 0.3 to 0.6% per year. And that's all I have today. There's certainly a lot more detail in our report, which is posted on the MDTA website. But if you have any particular questions on that or anything I said today, this is my information, both my phone number and my email. Please feel free to reach out to both, me or Chantel, and I'm more than happy to answer any of your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Morrison. Let me ask you a question, then I'll open it up for others to ask questions. Did the leakage increase because we moved to electronic tolls more so, and not having a person there to actually take the cash?
Yeah, anytime you go to all electronic tolling on any facility, you do have the additional leakage because people that went cash that you would have captured the cash, at the lane side at the moment, you're then putting them through the payment process. And so there's always going to be the human behavior aspect of it for sure. And the past few years certainly has gone up, but because there wasn't enforcement occurring, right? So because there was the customer assistance plan and they were trying to give customers the chance to get used to the new system, the new payment methods, they did provide discounts through video if you pay online ahead of time. And so we are seeing it uptick slightly, but that's a natural occurrence that always occurs when you go to AET. But when you do that, you're risking that leakage because you also get more people to sign up for Easy Pass, which is a guarantee. You have their information, you have their plate number. It's much easier to bill them. Whereas, people that are going through with an expired plate or from another state or things like that as a video customer, that's where your risk comes into play.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Members, do you have any questions? Bruce?
One question about development. So Trade Point Atlantic is undergoing a lot of expansions. We've heard about some grand awards. Is there anything specific in the forecast assumed about commercial vehicle impacts because of the developments in that area, or is that just kind of in the whole mix?
Yeah, so because we re-benchmark every year based on latest trends, essentially any growth we see is kind of maintained with our re-benchmarking. If we get any information from MDTA specifically of a situation like that, we'll account for it. I know in particular on the FSK, the Francis Scott Key, trucks have gone up because an Amazon facility has gone up, in the meantime. So whenever we're looking at what are the latest trends and benchmarking off of that, you're kind of year over year accounting for those changes in a slow way. We certainly don't account for any large upticks in commercial vehicles from that development. We're really focusing on the construction project specifically. And as I said, we track every month. I get the raw in-lane data from MDTA to see where trends are. And then we just account for it every year as we do the update.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was surprised when she said that they right-sized the commercial vehicles because of COVID, because I feel like more people are ordering online. So there's more commercial vehicles online and more department stores closing down where people
there certainly is
department stores as much.
Yeah, and there certainly is now compared to 2019, but the problem was in 2020 when everyone was home, and in 2021, the trucks were growing by like double digits, which, year over year, it can't continue that way. Once again, you're gonna have to reach a saturation point. So that was really just a COVID correction in a way within the growth rate, but beyond this year, it will remain positive.
Okay. Any other questions from the members?
I have a minor question. Is the projection of, based on the assumption of your toll rates not going to change into the future?
Correct. The only toll rate that was toll rate change that was assumed in this forecast is a reclassification, like 3 and 4 axles with trailers, but otherwise there's absolutely no, toll change accounted for, across the system or anything of that nature. That's also listed in table 4.1 within our report.
Bruce, did you have another question?
Does the forecast go out 10 years, as you say?
Yep, every year we do a 10-year forecast.
The financial forecast from MBTA has a toll increase shown as needed, but not anything assumed in what, 29, I think.
Yeah, Chantel would know that better, but certainly no toll rate assumed in our forecast. I think their financial, they look at the next 6 years is really their focus. If I'm not
Yes.
mistaken.
Yes, that is correct. So we look at our 6-year forecast, which is FY 2024 through FY 2029. Our most recent forecast shows that we break coverage and fiscal debt service coverage in fiscal year 2029.
Okay. Thanks, Chantel. That came up in the train commission and Paul said the same thing. I just figured I might as well say it here.
Okay, thanks, Bruce.
All right. Well, Ms. Morrison, thank you so much for your presentation. It was very useful.
Sure, thank you for having me.
All right, we'll move to the next item on the agenda. Ms. Heather Murphy will review the revised FY 2024-2029 CTP Consolidated Transportation Program with time for a discussion with the members. Heather, good morning.
Discuss. We're okay. All right, I do have a presentation Todd is bringing up. So obviously there is probably a few things to talk about. This has been a very unusual year. We have never gone out with a draft CTP that wasn't solved, i.e. the revenue matches the projects that we had in there. The secretary was very interested in taking out the CTP as it was to all of the counties and Baltimore City in our fall tour to get a feel for an understanding of where people were, what their priorities were, what we needed to do, and a lot happened between that draft and where we are today. So I didn't go to the next slide. I was just going to cover kind of how we got here, what our process was to solve the gap, and then a overview of the operating and capital reductions, primarily focused on the Baltimore region, obviously. All right, next slide. How we got here, as I said, we are in a position that we haven't been in a long time. The last revenue increase was 10 years ago. The 3 biggest factors since then is inflation. Everybody's been seeing that. COVID obviously had a very dramatic impact. We just heard from the toll authority on how it affected tolls. It is affecting everything for us. And one of the biggest things is, while we've had a lot of inflation, our construction costs are highly over that inflation, and all those have affected kind of where we were. On the capital side, on the operating side, our budget is growing on the operating side. During the CTP, we saw the operating costs go 7 times faster than the revenues. It is a multitude of different things, but a lot of it has to do with how much it's costing us to keep our employees, to recruit employees, to pay all the contractors and consultants and construction oversight that we do. All of that is going up much faster than our revenues are. Hence, one of the things Bruce mentioned earlier, that we do have the train commission that is looking at this issue. It is a 2-year effort for that. They are only that first process into that, so we will see where that ends up. But as I said, we started with the draft CTP back in September with a 2.1 billion. Oh, that is a typo. A $2.1 billion gap. And since then, our changes have made that gap up to $3.3 billion. So a lot needed to happen. Our process to solve that gap was really looking at what things we really had to keep in the program and what we had to reduce. Some of it is obviously standard things. Anything that was under construction stayed. That isn't really a factor. We always point to the purple line. You never want to stop something while it's in construction, for many, many reasons. So that as a given. We looked at a lot of the federal discretionary grants. Anything we'd already received, we kept the match for, so we keep that federal money. Everything that is in the development and evaluation phase, so looking at planning and engineering, all of those funds stayed. And any system preservation project that was primarily for safety, all of those things stayed. We do still have a $20 billion 6-year program. So it's not like we don't have a lot of money to do a lot of things. We just don't have as much as we would like to do everything that we would like to get done, even on a reasonable level. Obviously, needs are even higher than that. So to attack that issue, the first thing we did was look at an 8% reduction in the operating budget for every mode. That was everything from the secretary's office all the way through all of the modes. Really was handled very differently depending on the mode and what they had in their operating budget. But there were no furloughs, no layoffs. We've kept the personnel that we have, but we have had to make some modifications to stay within our means. The other big thing that we did that has gotten a lot of attention is we delayed the construction funding for all of the major expansion projects that aren't going to be advertised by the end of this year. I would emphasize that these were all funds in the out years of the program. I don't believe anything started before fiscal year 26. So there is time with any kind of change in our revenue picture to be able to add that construction funding in and not slow any of the projects up. As I said, our D&E funds are all still in there. We are still moving forward with all of those projects. So we did not delay any of those projects. We did have to look at some system preservation reductions, primarily in the port, MTA, and state highway, just because that was how their funding laid out. And we are proposing some funding reductions for local jurisdictions that I can go into a little later. All right. Kind of that process to solve the gap included a lot of things in the Baltimore area. Obviously, the biggest interest seems to be on the red line. We are continuing to fund that. We're moving through the process. Nothing changed with that project. We have an additional $90 million that the General Assembly put into that project. So that is moving along at a very fast pace. We are also added funding for the Amtrak Northeast Corridor grants, particularly the largest one was an additional $450 million for the Frederick Douglass replacement tunnel. That is $50 million a year starting in fiscal 26. So not all of that is in our 6-year program, but we committed to Amtrak as they got those grants fully announced. There's also some money for Susquehanna Crossing and a look at the Bush and Gunpowder bridges as well for Amtrak. All of those are going to have huge positive impacts on our MARC system. So we are partners on that. As I said earlier, we are continuing the planning and engineering for all the major expansion projects, including the I-795 Dole-Field interchange. That is moving along as is. We've also tried to get what we can put on the Mid-Bay Island Ecosystem Restoration Project. Very fancy name for rebuilding 2 islands in the middle of the bay for that Chesapeake Bay, not the port inside Baltimore City, but all the bay dredging. We need placement needs for that. That is a Corps of Engineers project. that, again, like Amtrak, we have commitments to put our piece of the puzzle into that. So we have worked on funding some of that. We also looked at things that we know are very important to all of our constituents. Looking at workforce development, there is federal money that is allowable on that, and we are making a big push on our workforce development. We are funding our Complete Streets program that has been on the books for quite a few years that never had funding. We have a FY25 amount in there to start that program. And we look to get some more additional money on the bikeways program so that we can continue to award those bikeways grants to the locals, which have been very popular and have gotten some really good projects in the bike arena done. We also have funding for TOD development. There are two projects. One is along the Penn line for the MARC system, and one is a regional Baltimore metropolitan area. All of that funding remains so that we can continue to look at ways to promote all of those different things. All right, Todd, looking at the reductions, the operating budget said it's a little deceiving in that our operating budget in the final CTP last year that was approved by the legislature in April and what we showed in the draft CTP, we are actually up over both of those. Primarily, we looked at what needed to happen. A lot of that was increased compensation for positions. The governor increased salaries for all state employees. That means us as well. And we looked at a lot of need at MTA, especially in their more provider side, so their maintenance staff and the actual drivers for light rail, metro, and bus. So with that, we added $192 million overall in all of the budgets. Then we needed to take $184 million out. Was obviously we can't take what we added out since it was in as positions DBM controlled funding for those things. So we are looking at reducing most of the commuter bus service. The ridership is just nowhere near where it was before. We talked about with COVID, a lot of people are going into the office only 2 or 3 days a week. What we're seeing is a lot of them that took the commuter bus 5 days a week aren't even taking the commuter bus those 2 or 3 days they're going in. It's only a few days and they're driving instead. We've been working on trying to convince them to come back to the commuter bus, but we are well below 25% of our capacity is actually being served by those commuter buses. We also looked at some impacts to the locals, looking at reducing some lots federal match. We left all the federal money in there, but we're reducing our state match. We're also doing some things at MVA to reduce their operating budget. Again, we don't want to reduce their labor force, and there are a lot of their operating budget is based that way. So they are looking at closing the Parkville MVA office. It is not as widely used, and there are others very close, and looking at stopping the Saturday hours and the extended Thursday hours at the MVA offices that were offering that. All right, capital reductions. I'm going to just focus on the Baltimore area. Obviously, MTA's main service is here in Baltimore. There are some upgrades to MTA's bus system that we are delaying. We are delaying the transition to zero bus program, so it doesn't mean we're not buying zero emission buses. We are just buying them at a slower rate and taking a bit more time to finish the facilities, particularly the Eastern Bus facility. And we've had to reduce a bit of their state of good repair. SHA, we've talked about Dulfield. We did take the construction funding out of the I-97 and I-70 TISMO projects, out of the two smaller projects in Carroll County, the US 1 bypass at 24 in Harford County. And we did also reduce state highways, state of good repair. So that is my high level overview. There are documents on our website. There are documents, all these documents. There's a, what is about a 20-page overview document that is on our website. It is also on the Train Commission website. And there is a press release that went out that has some more context and a little bit more specifics looking at the whole region. So with that, I will take questions.
Any
Todd, are you
questions from the
gonna-
members? Oh, it
was
looks
gonna
like
say.
Sam has a question.
I know Sam does.
Go ahead, Sam.
Thank you for presenting that. I know it's a very bitter pill to swallow for most of us counties in the region, and you're the messenger. So
Yes,
I just
yes,
have a
remember
few-
that. I am just the messenger.
So I just have a few logistical questions about
Sure.
some of the reductions. For the commuter bus, I hear one camp states reduction, almost complete reduction, and then another camp has told me elimination. Where are we exactly on which lines will be eliminated or consolidated perhaps into one line? I wasn't sure what exactly that final message was from MDOT.
Well, I think the confusion is that there isn't a final evaluation. They are still looking to see contract wise. So one of the issues we have is all of the commuter bus services are contracted out. We don't run them ourselves at MTA. So we are having to take a look at contracts we have, and it will be a majority of the bus services. There is always an opportunity that if there is one that is deemed that is actually performing well above the others, we may look at whether we can retain that. But for the most part, I said, I think Liz is still on. I believe we are at 17% capacity overall. So it is a service that we are providing that is not handling anywhere near the number of riders that it did before.
Okay. And then as a follow-up to that,
sure.
Is there any opportunity perhaps to fund in the budget a short range to long range study, perhaps for an express bus to replace those services operated by an MTA rather than the contractors, just as a sort of bus bridge until they figure out whether they want to move forward commuter bus in any shape or form in the future?
That is something I don't know about, but I think it's certainly something that we can look into. I said all of this is based on fiscal 25, so we have roughly 6 months to figure out what we'll do. All of this, I'll start with, all of this is premised on, this is the budget that we're going to submit with the governor's budget on the 17th of January. There is a 3-month legislative session. What comes out of that legislative session is probably not going to be exactly what we put into it. So there's always opportunities that way as well.
So my other question was the lots reductions. It wasn't specifically highlighted, but those are 40% overall to operations. And then for some counties, specifically two, it was 17 million and 14 million respectively for the top two. The rest was significantly less. But was there a certain logic behind that 40% versus the 8% overall that other agencies received, and even the MTA bus routes themselves?
We're starting to get past my knowledge.
Okay.
I do know that part of this is our reduction, and there's also a local match on all of the lots. So overall, you won't be reducing lot service by 40% because there's still the 80% federal, the 10% local, and conceivably no reduction to service if the localities could come up with the other 40% of the 10%.
Okay, so the logic is that the locals proposed to their county executives or commissioners or mayor that we increase our operating budgets as a result of these cuts.
Yeah, there's always an option. I said, I don't know. I
Okay.
know Liz is on this call. She may have a better answer than I do.
Okay,
Yep.
I understand.
Yeah, you've got it right, Sam. What we're proposing is a reduction to our contribution, which would not reduce the amount of federal that's out there, but in order to still get the same amount of federal, the additional match has to come from somewhere to get to the full 20% match. And our assumption is that, yeah, it'll be asking for more from the locals in order to still leverage that same amount of federal money.
So not to move more in a positive direction, it seemed like based on some conversations I had, our federal amount is still increasing, but we won't know what that increase based on the new formula is until January or February.
That's right. We're still working with our Office of Local Transit Support on finalizing that new formula. Yep.
Okay. Well, that's something I look forward to. And then I do appreciate that the design and engineering on those projects like 97 is still moving forward. I appreciate that the state will consider or is budgeting for design and engineering to move forward on those key projects, not just for our county, but for others. And I thank you for continuing with the design and engineering components. And I also want to highlight that you had stated there is still a legislative option from our legislature to develop more revenue streams in order to make us whole with this budget in the short and long term coming this spring. So this is not a set in stone budget. It's a draft budget, and there are opportunities for the legislature to make changes. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you very much.
Do we have any other questions from the members? Bruce?
I didn't have my hand up.
Oh, well, you know, when your
You
camera
always
comes
have a
on,
question.
Now, just a request. I mean, the commuter bus issue is one that I know is complicated with those contracts, but it's also, you know, I have seen the performance by line. I think there's like 13 lines underneath that 17%. I just would hope that MDOT would be making sure that those decisions are as transparent as possible and as early as possible, so that because there's a lot of coordination that we do at the local level. Some of us do not have rail service except for Camden line along the border, even though we're kind of in an urbanized area. Some of those lines, even though they don't have high ridership, maybe compared to a Southern Maryland trunk line or an Annapolis to DC, are still very important for kind of the lower wage federal worker or something that's trying to get into DC. So, you know, whatever options can be considered as those reductions are made, if things have to be rethought. I think we could use this as an opportunity on the commuter bus side rather than simply a crisis. So just a plea to keep thinking about how commuter bus can be re-envisioned even for some of those lines that aren't that well performing.
Yeah, no, fair enough. And I think that was some of what Sam had asked for too. We will definitely take a look at that.
In the same vein, Liz, will fixed route service be cut? And if so, when will we know what fixed route service will be cut?
So this current proposal does not propose any cuts to core bus service. So as Heather said, when we were looking at how we were going to make this 8% reduction, we were really looking both at how many sort of people per trip, people per dollar we could serve with our services, and our fixed route bus service, light rail service, metro service are really our heavy haulers. And these are also the services where people with fewer other options use the service and people with lower household incomes use the service. So this proposal does not have any cuts to that core service in it.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Todd, you have a question?
Yeah, just as obviously our position, with the region, we just wanted to ask Heather, could you confirm if the budget that's going to be submitted will include the additional PREA funding for WMATA and the bailout funding that is being requested? And if so, just the reasoning behind the fully funding of WMATA's request and the cuts, to the rest of the system. Was there just kind of a reasoning behind that?
Okay, so we'll go with the facts first. Yes, there were no cuts. The 8% did not apply to WMATA. There's a lot of complications between us, DC, and Virginia. So there's no way for us to cut the 8% without an agreement with the other two jurisdictions down there. It's a compact that we have, we're on the hook for. With that said, there was also in the budget 150 million additional operating dollars for WMATA for fiscal 25 and 26, and $250 million additional for what would that be? So 25, 26, so then 27, 28, 29 as an additional 250 million. That again has a lot to do with the interaction of the District of Columbia and the state of Virginia, and trying to hold up our share of the request that WMATA has asked of all of the jurisdictions, try to fill their gap. With that said, there are reductions. There are quite a few proposals that WMATA has come out with recently, including a way to fill the gap with reducing service. It is much more dramatic than the 8% cut and loss of what we have. As Liz said, we are not reducing any of the core service in Baltimore. There are proposals, even with the 150 million, if that were to be matched by the other two jurisdictions, it would still require cuts in DC to their service that would most likely be above that 8%. So that was a discussion that we had with the other two jurisdictions. I said, WMATA is always a lot more complicated because you have three jurisdictions. And I say three jurisdictions, it's actually a lot more than that, because on the Virginia side, it is not the state that comes up with the entire funding portion for Virginia. The jurisdictions in Northern Virginia also have some piggyback taxes that help pay for WMATA service as well. So it gets very complicated with a lot of different players. So the decision was made to do our fair share of what needs to happen down there in DC region. It does, have some issues with balance between Virginia and DC and Maryland down there, as well as a balance with our Baltimore service. We've pointed out many times before that we are one of the only states our size that has two major transit systems that we are maintaining and supporting, and that definitely causes us some funding issues when we get into times like now.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it.
All right.
Do we have any other questions?
One question for Heather. Thank you.
Sure.
Does the proposed budget contain cuts or delays to removing bottlenecks and expanding capacity in the I-97 corridor?
So we have the I-97 TISMO project that we have retained the planning and design money for that. So we are still moving forward with that project. I believe that one was further out. I don't think we were looking at construction funding until at least 27, if not 28 or 29. So we're still on schedule with that project. We will need additional revenue once we get out there, but we are still looking at what we can do. So I have lots of employees that drive that corridor every day in the morning and evening, and I know they have made their voices known that there are some bottleneck issues that we might be able to deal with without any kind of super large project, and that's what the TISMO is all about. Is taking a look at spot improvements where we can do, you know, an additional lane for a section or weaving changes or those kind of things. So we are still looking at all of those, and that will continue to move forward on schedule.
So what aspect of the TISMO I-97 project would be reduced under the proposal?
Just the construction funding in the out years. So once we get out there into whatever year, I don't think I have which year that one was off the top of my head, but we're going to move forward until we need that construction funding. And then at that point, we will need additional revenue so that we can fund that.
I understand. Okay. Yeah, another question is about workforce development. There's enhancements or additional funding for that. What is meant by workforce development in the context of MDOT's budget?
Very good. I'll see how much I remember of what my staff has been working on. But there is federal funding available through the US DOT to try to work towards having the DOTs work in concert with community colleges, technical schools, and trying to get at the resources that we need for construction projects, whether they're system preservation at transit or an expansion at the highway. There are skilled laborers that we need, and there is a huge gap between what is needed by the construction industry and what is available in those skill sets. So we are spending a lot of money to try to promote and help fund training programs. I said, you know, our Assistant Secretary, Tony Bridges, just did a piece at the Lincoln Tech Institute where we will help entities like that fund programs to get, you know, primarily the focus is kids right out of high school, but anybody who is underemployed or could use the skill development to be able to get a better job. So there's a lot of work going on, primarily working right now in the Baltimore region, actually, based on other programs and systems that are in place, trying to get at getting those skilled laborers so that we don't have issues with construction delays on the projects that we are moving forward with. And when we get additional revenue, start moving forward with some major projects, we get a lot of construction going at the same time. There isn't the labor force to actually do the work to get those projects constructed. So it's a lot of work, you know, just figuring out what is needed and who can help us and help fund the program so that we can provide. I think they go down to providing scholarships as well as helping entities staff up to be able to do the teaching to be able to get these people skilled up so that they can help us. And not just it's wide open. It's not necessarily they would get state jobs. Contractors that are doing work for the counties are in the same boat. So this would be an overall transportation focus on the workforce.
Right. Okay, thank you. Appreciate it. Good work.
Sure.
All right.
Are we good?
Don't think you have any more questions, Heather.
All right. Thank
All
you.
right. Thank you, Heather. We appreciate it. So, is there any other business to come before BRTB this morning? Hearing none, I want to wish you all, hearing none, let me take a vote first to close the meeting. All in favor, say aye.
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 All right, so the next meeting of BRTB will be held in person, you guys, on January 23rd, 2024. And with that, I want to wish you all a happy holiday. Thank you all so much and enjoy the holiday.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
All righty, thanks a lot.
Happy holiday.